A snap election in France. Emmanuel Macron goes to the country in an immediate reaction to his party's poor showing in the European elections. The far right, Rassemblement National, outperformed Macron's list. It had been predicted by the opinion polls, but there has always been a kind of unwritten pact here in France. Anyone but the far right. But today, the revamped far right has succeeded in gaining ground across France. This tells the story of how National Rally is now the biggest party in this vote in the European elections. Renew, that is the Macron bloc, coming in second. Worth noting the rise of the Socialist Party, which at one point was non-existent but now appears to be on the growth again. Emmanuel Macron then taking a gamble politically, much like de Gaulle and Mitterrand before him, who went to the polls to tackle a crisis. But will this leave Macron as a canard boiteux, a lame duck president, with the far right finally achieving what some say is the unthinkable and gaining actual power in the Assemblée Nationale, the French lower house of Congress? Andrew Hillier with this report.
Emmanuel Macron's roll of the dice has been described as one of the biggest gambles in French political history. And the stakes are massive.
This election will have the most far-reaching consequences for France and the French people in the history of the Fifth Republic.
According to media reports, a tiny circle of advisors spent months working on the high-stakes plan. By putting it into action, it could draw attention away from his crushing electoral defeat in the European elections, focusing minds on the upcoming battle for the National Assembly. Analysts say Macron is moving to reclaim the initiative by calling the National Rally's bluff and forcing it into an election faster than it had hoped. So what are the possible outcomes? This is the scenario that Emmanuel Macron would like to see, a snap election that jolts voters of different political persuasions into rallying around a mainstream candidate to halt the gains of the far right.
It's a very risky gamble. The so-called Republican vote against the far right has been largely eroded. At these elections, they even gained new voters.
Another possibility is that no one party wins anything near a majority, leading to a messy parliament for the next 3 years and making it even harder to pass legislation. But there's another possible outcome: sweeping far-right gains. That could lead to what's called cohabitation in France, when the president is forced to appoint a prime minister from the political opposition because it's the only candidate capable of winning the backing of the National Assembly.
Andrew Hillier sets the scene. Let's now get some in-depth analysis. Ariane Bogain joins us. Ariane is a senior lecturer in French politics at Northumbria University, joining us there from the northeast of England in Newcastle-on-Tyne. Ariane, as always, pleasure to have you here on France 24. Macron's gamble. Just tell us what's at stake.
I mean, it's a huge gamble, and you know, like so many people yesterday, I was gobsmacked. It was such a curveball. No one expected that, and I think the reason why it's such a gamble is usually when you have a relative majority, you use dissolution when the circumstances are right, as in when you have good reasons to believe that you are going to win. But the circumstances here are totally different. Macron is unpopular after 7 years. He has generated a lot of anger, especially over the pension reform, and we could see the payback yesterday. He suffered a crushing defeat yesterday. The far right is above 30% and it has momentum. So it's not the good conditions to do a dissolution. And that's why it's a gamble, because we might end up in a month's time with a far-right prime minister. So it's a massive shock and a massive gamble.
It would have been unthinkable, wouldn't it, not so long ago, that the far right could be in this position. I can recall back in 2002, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, when Jean-Marie Le Pen made it to round two, and that scandalized everybody. There was like cries of never the far right, never the far right. Yeah. What's changed in France?
I mean, you know, we have seen the rise of the far right since 2002, and especially since 2017, when Marine Le Pen went to the second round, and then 2022. There's a lot of drivers for it. There's a lot of grievances, economic, social grievances, a lot of fear about the future, the fear of being neglected. There is an anxiety about identity, about immigration. There's a fear of security, and we should not forget that the far right has been normalized. It normalized itself by toning down its rhetoric, changing its message, but it's also been normalized by other parties. When Macron did his immigration law and used some form of national preference that was then struck down by the Constitutional Council, it helps to normalize it. And we see it as well with the media, where, I've been in France for nearly 2 months now, and when I watch the news channel at night, the debates are all centered on far-right narratives like immigration or security. So all of these factors explain the situation, plus the anger against Macron and so many crises since really 2019, the yellow vest, the COVID, the war in Ukraine, the cost of living, and this feeling that Macron is not doing, is not doing enough to bring hope.
I'll get off the fence and I'll say it. The National Front, National Rally, Rassemblement National, that's part of the rebranding too, isn't it? Changing from the old name associated with Jean-Marie Le Pen into this new name, getting Jordan Bardella to front things instead of Marine Le Pen, changing literally the face of the far right in France. But essentially, it is the same old racist rhetoric, is it not? This attitude towards immigrants, towards migrants, it's basic racism.
It is. The core program has never changed. It's the packaging that has changed, the smoothing of the rhetoric, but it remains a nativist party that wants national preference for French people that they defined in a specific way. The core program has never changed. It's the packaging that has, and it's the normalization and the mainstreamization of this party that has changed. But yes, it remains a nativist party.
Final example of that it's about colour as well. Jordan Bardella, who is of Italian descent and not that far back, I think it's his grandfather, said that, well, there are two types of migrants. There's migrants like me and then the ones who aren't white. He didn't say the ones that aren't white, but that was the implication.
It's the subtext, and it's always there, and it's always been there. So yeah, it hasn't changed, but it has capitalized on the anger, on the various crises, and on Macron that right from the start really has been seen as arrogant, as cut off from ordinary people, and it has capitalized on the collapse of the Socialist Party, which has come back. For yesterday we saw the green shoots for the Socialist Party, but it has failed. And let's not forget as well that it has been perceived as the main opposition party, and it has been positioned as such by Macron, who thought that he would benefit by putting the National Rally as its main opponent to try and recreate this Republican front against the National Rally. But it hasn't worked, and we'll have to see what happens in the election. But there is a likelihood that the far right might win.
The Front Républicain, the Republican Front, which is usually this barrage politically, which is set up against the far right, i.e. vote for anybody but the far right. Yeah. Why is that seemingly dissolved now?
I think it's because it started in 2002, as you said earlier, when Jean-Marie Le Pen went to the second round of the presidential election, and it was a scandal. So this was created then, but it has been used and used and used ever since. And I think a lot of voters are getting irritated, are getting unhappy at the idea of having to vote yet again against someone rather than for. So a lot of voters are basically grew tired of this, of this Republican front. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but what we don't know is the size of it. I think there will be an anti-far right kind of rally, whether it benefits Macron's candidates or the left candidates, if they manage to unite, which is always a bit of a problem for the left, we'll have to see. But we can't take it for granted anymore. We could in 2002, but people have grown tired of the same old Republican front.
Ariane Bogain, I could talk for much, much longer with you because it's always fascinating. Your insight is much appreciated. However, time is up. Ariane Bogain joining us from the... Oh, thank you, Ariane. Believe me, the thanks is all to you. Thank you very much indeed. Ariane Bogain, senior lecturer in French politics at Northumbria University, joining us to give us an insight into Macron's big gamble, the snap election. We, of course, will continue all our coverage of every development until voting day and beyond. This is Apropos.